Today I am doing a native plant seed haul. I am really excited to share some of these native plant seeds with you today. A lot of them really aren't your run-of-the-mill native plants, so I think that you're going to enjoy hearing about some of these varieties. Welcome to my YouTube channel, 90% Native. My name is Michelle and I grow native plants, I garden for the wildlife, and I am teaching myself to grow my own vegetables and preserve them. In case you don't know, or if you're new to native plant gardening, native plants are the perfect choice to add to your landscape and to your garden beds because they are plants that are adapted to your local climate and local ecosystem, making them low maintenance. They also provide critical food for your native wildlife, so your songbirds and your butterflies, bees, beneficial insects, small mammals. They just really deserve a place in your garden. I purchased all of these seeds from a company in, I think it's Minnesota, called Prairie Moon Nursery. Now, that is a long ways away from Northern Virginia. I just wanted to quickly throw out there that there is something called local ecotype. There is a benefit to getting plants and seeds that are locally sourced versus plants and seeds that are coming from very different parts of the country with genetics that may not be as specifically fine-tuned for your local area. So that's all I'm going to say about that. I like to order from Prairie Moon Nursery. I also do a tremendous amount of my native plant shopping at Earth Sangha, which is local ecotype. So let's get started. I will put the botanical or Latin names up on the screen. Some of them I will use, some of them I will use the common names. I really don't feel like fighting with some of those Latin names today, so you'll see information up on the screen. This order I placed is mainly for two projects that I am working on. The first project is in the Shenandoah Valley at my parents' house. They live up on a mountain called Blue Mountain, and they have very, very dry, rocky soil, and they have a lot of shade. The other project that I am growing for is at one of my best friend's house down in West Point, Virginia, and they live right on the Pamunkey River, and they have an area in their yard that goes down to their dock, their waterfront dock, and on the side of this path that goes down are these slopes. Okay, those slopes are very, very dry, part sun and shade, and so that's what I am growing for as well this winter. And of course, I'm going to keep a bunch of these for myself, because why not, right? The first group of seeds that I am going to talk about are seeds that do well in part sun and can tolerate drought. Actually, all the seeds that I'm going to talk about today can tolerate drought. This batch is going to be the part sun seeds, and they really are part sun type plants. A lot of them can take full sun, but I really wanted plants that weren't like specifically full sun, because a lot of times if you try and push those conditions for full sun plants, there'll be plants that you find will be flopping a lot in your garden. One more note before we get started. Almost all of these plants need cold, moist stratification in order to germinate. So that means that they need a period of cold where it is freezing, thawing, freezing, thawing. The seeds are getting snowed on, rained on, all that kind of good stuff throughout the winter. And the amount of time that it takes or that the plants need for cold stratification varies. So I will let you know what those timelines are for each of these plants. There's a couple of them that there's a couple of them that do not have any germination requirements, and I'll point those out as well. So first up, we have partridge pea, and if you didn't know of any native annuals, partridge pea is one of our native annuals. Partridge pea is on the shorter side of cold, moist stratification, only needs 10 days of cold, moist stratification. These are gorgeous, gorgeous plants with beautiful yellow blooms, and the bumblebees go wild, like they go wild for this plant. And it's actually a plant that I've started interplanting with tomatoes because of all of the extra buzz pollination. So I'm just kind of seeing how that is going to do for me over the next couple years. Partridge pea is also a prolific self-seeder. and it is in the legume family. So that means that it is a nitrogen fixer. That means through a symbiotic process with specific bacteria, nitrogen is pulled from the air and transformed into usable nitrogen for the plant. So it is definitely a plant that is very good for your soil. It adds soil back, or it adds nitrogen back to the soil. And because it is an annual, some people may be tempted to just pull the plants out of the ground in the fall or the winter or whenever. Don't do that with these guys. Let them self-seed around if you want, but don't pull them out of the ground. Cut them back at the base and let those roots decompose in the soil, because if you pull it out, you're taking out some of that usable nitrogen. Next up, I have Rudbeckia hirta. If you watched my video from the other day, and I'll put a card up to link to that, I talked about very easy, low maintenance starter native plants to grow. Rudbeckia hirta is definitely one of them, so I'll link to that. But this is a plant that blooms in the middle of the summer. You see it everywhere. It blooms forever, just beautiful yellow blooms. And the cold stratification time for Rudbeckia hirta is 30 days. Next up is a native plant that is new to me, and this is Euphorbia correlata, or flowering spurge. I've never heard of this plant before. I think that I saw it mentioned in my Chesapeake Bay landscaping book, and I pulled it out because it was a part sun drought tolerant plant. This plant needs 30 days of cold moist stratification. I don't have personal experience with this plant, but I understand that it blooms for a really good amount of time, like 6 weeks, and it's also sometimes called baby's breath because it resembles the baby's breath that you get in like floral bouquets. This guy gets to be about 3 feet tall. The next plant is Pussy Toes, and it is named that because it has just really, really sweet flowers, and they look like the toe pads of the bottom of a kitten's foot. I absolutely love this plant. When I planted this for the first time a few years ago, I immediately saw the American lady butterfly visiting my yard. And it was just the neatest thing to see, because the American ladies were on these plants, and then what do you know, I had the American lady caterpillars, which then turned into more American lady butterflies, which I will take as many American lady butterflies as possible. So if you're growing these and you see a bunch of caterpillars on the leaves, don't worry, those are probably an American lady caterpillar. If you see the leaves curled up, that might be because the caterpillar is about to emerge from a leaf. So anyway, this is a really, really great plant to support your American lady butterflies. Also, I consider this very similar to the milkweed, where if you don't have enough of it, those American lady caterpillars will just eat it all up. So I highly recommend you growing a lot of these. Okay, so the next plant is one that I cannot get enough of. And over the past few years, I've been trying to grow more and more of them and get them in more and more places in my yard. And this plant is called Fire Pink. The color on these flowers is spectacular. It's like a really, really bright red, but more on the blush side of red than on like the brick side of red. Just absolutely gorgeous plants. But these are plants that you want to put, like seriously, you want to put it in the right place or else it will not thrive. It's very particular. So this is a true part sun plant, and it also wants to be a little bit on the dry side. So if you have those conditions, these guys will do really well for you. 2 more notes about Fire Pink. Fire Pink needs, let's see, 60 days of cold moist stratification, and also this is one of those plants that are gonna bloom in what I call like the dead zone. Like around here, it's June, and it's like all the spring plants have bloomed and they're done. and it is too early for the summer flowers to be blooming. So it's that one little bit of time where it's really hard to find things blooming, and fire pink will definitely be blooming during that time. The last part sun plant that I am going to talk about is called hoary skullcap. They need 60 days of cold, moist stratification. They can get up to 3 feet tall, usually a little smaller. They have very, very beautiful flowers, very different than what you would think of when you think of a native plant. They're small flowers, but they're gorgeous. And they're seed heads. After the flowers die back and you're left with the seed heads are really interesting. So leave those seed heads up for winter interest. Next up is the one full sun plant from my seed haul, and that is wild petunia. Wild petunia is relatively new to me, so I think I started growing it maybe 2 years ago, and so I guess that's kind of new to me, but I absolutely love it and I want it everywhere, and it self-seeds prolifically, so it is growing everywhere. Like the name suggests, petunia, it does look like the petunias that you see in your nursery centers, but the flowers are a lot smaller. They're not going to be like those big, huge petunias, and it is just a very beautiful, delicate color of purple, and the cold stratification time is 60 days. 60 days of cold, moist stratification. These also look really good when planted in a mass. So if you want a self-seeder, a spreader, just a beautiful all-around plant, wild petunia. So now I'm going to move on to the plants that can tolerate a little bit of shade. We're going to start with hairy beard tongue. So that is in the penstemon family. Hairy beard tongue requires 60 days of cold, moist stratification. And penstemons, unlike some of the other plants I mentioned, these ones are pretty popular, so you've probably heard of them. It's another plant that blooms in the late spring, early summer, so really good to have around in that time where there's a lot of other lacking blooms. These are loved by the hummingbirds, by the butterflies, by the bumblebees. Just a really great plant to have for the pollinators. And another reason to grow the hairy beard tongue is because it is the host plant to a few of the checker spot butterflies, and specifically in my area that would be the Baltimore checker spot. So fantastic reason to grow the penstemons. The next flower I am going to talk about is blue mist flower. Now I'm just going to preface this with, it is supposed to be a very aggressive self-seeder spreader. I haven't found that to be the case, but I think that's just because of my environment, because I do know it does spread really well in other places, but I absolutely love the blooms on blue mist flower. It's another plant that is on the shorter side, so you don't have to deal with a lot of maintenance where, staking and things like that come into play. Blue mist flower needs 60 days of cold, moist stratification, and also it is one of those plants that you want to sow the seeds on the surface as opposed to burying them, because they need a little bit of sun to germinate. Just know that if you wanted to sprinkle some coarse vermiculite over top of the seeds to prevent them from bouncing out in the rain or anything like that, you can do that. The sun will penetrate through the cracks of the coarse vermiculite. Next I have Aquilegia canadensis, or columbine. This is just a stunning, stunning plant with red and yellow blooms, and they actually bloom in time to coincide with the arrival of the hummingbirds. It is a hummingbird favorite. And this plant, it really hasn't done tremendous for me in my yard. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's because I do have a lot of leaf litter and things like that. I don't really know, but I'm really hoping that it will do well down in West Point or up in my parents' house. And columbine needs 60 days of cold, moist stratification. Next up is Pycnanthemum incanum, and this is another one of the mountain mints. And so if you know me, you know I love my mountain mints, and this is actually one that I did not mention in my last video. So Pycnanthemum and Canum is one of the plants that do not need any germination treatment. So you can plant it and it doesn't need cold moist stratification, or it doesn't need to be scarified, anything like that. So that makes it very, very easy to grow from seed. Also, the information from Prairie Moon says that this is a full sun to part shade plant. Now, I'm sure that's true, and I'm sure that this plant probably does best in those conditions. However, I have different materials, actually a couple different materials or publications that say that this is almost like a full shade plant. And because of the environment up at my parents' house where it is, where they do have a lot of shade and a lot of dry conditions, I want to give this guy a go. So I am growing this for hopefully its shade tolerant characteristics, but I will definitely let you know how that goes. And then you can't have a garden without goldenrods. Goldenrods are so very important for our pollinators because the goldenrods and the asters, those are the plants that feed our pollinators before they head in for winter. So I have blue stem goldenrod. This is a shady goldenrod. There's another shady goldenrod called zigzag goldenrod. I think it's a little taller. If I'm not mistaken, that's why I'm choosing a blue stem. So anyway, you gotta have these blue stem or these goldenrods in your yard for the late pollinators. This is a 60-day cold moist stratification. And what else should I say? Oh, goldenrods. Okay. A lot of people think that goldenrods give them allergies. Goldenrods don't give you allergies. It's ragweed, which looks similar and blooms at the same time, and that's what gives you the allergies, not the goldenrod. So don't think you're gonna get allergies if you plant goldenrod. The last seed pack that I purchased that will tolerate some shade is wild blue phlox. Wild blue phlox needs 60 days of cold moist stratification. I have a really tough time getting this plant to germinate for some reason, but I really wanted to try it again. That's why I got these. And also, I don't know if you have noticed as I have been doing this video, but there are a lot of yellows and purples and whites and reds. And that is because my friend down in West Point, those are colors that she really likes to see in her gardens. But anyway, so I wanted to see if I could get a couple going for her. Something interesting, or I don't know, whatever, just something to note is that for years, so I've had this plant for years, right? And absolutely love it. The purple blooms are phenomenal. And every year I see hummingbird moths on my wild blue phlox. Every year the plant dies back to the ground and there's only like a little bit of the new growth showing. And every year I'm like, what's going on? Is it dying? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, this went on for years, and finally, it took me years to like, you know, pull up Google and be like, is wild blue phlox an ephemeral? Sure enough, wild blue phlox is ephemeral. So know that when you're designing your gardens, that you may want to interplant this with something else so that you don't have a lot of bare spots after this one starts to die back. If I didn't mention it, wild blue phlox requires 60 days of cold moist stratification. I have one grass on my list, and that is prairie dropseed. I actually already have a bunch of prairie dropseed seed. I just wanted to make sure I have enough. And I'm kind of cheating a little bit with my prairie dropseed. It's one of those plants like purple coneflower that's not technically native to my area. It's native a little west of here, but it is a fantastic plant for habitat, for nesting material. The seed heads are great. And which is really interesting, it has a smell that people say smells like coriander or buttered popcorn. I haven't smelled it yet, but hopefully I will eventually. I have found that they're slow to grow, so all the prairie dropseed I have in my yard I have grown from seed, and they're still relatively small plants. What I plan to do with the prairie drop seed is that I would like to see if my friend down in West Point wants to line the bottom of her slopes that go down towards the waterfront with the prairie drop seed. I think that would be a really, really pretty look. So yeah, that's why I am growing prairie drop seed this year. Oh, and prairie drop seed, it doesn't have any germination requirements, so I will go ahead and get this seeded in my flats. I will still put them out all winter long, even though it doesn't need it, and then they'll start germinating in the spring. Something else that I'm going to do is I'm probably going to seed these a little on the heavier side. I almost forgot about the shrub I have on my list, and that is New Jersey tea. Guys, this one is a stunner. I am talking a stunner. The blooms are just gorgeous. So this is a 60-day cold moist stratification requirement. It says that you could also do a heat treatment on the seeds instead of the 60-day cold moist stratification. I'm going to go ahead and just seed them and put them outside. But this is a great little shrub because it doesn't get over 3 feet tall. It's one of those really great shrubs that you can cut back down to the ground in the late winter if you wanted to, and that's called regenerative pruning if you wanted to look that up. And this blooms in the very late spring, early summer. The pollinators love it. It's really just a great addition to your yard. So with that being said, I want to give you a word of caution. New Jersey tea is deer candy. I have it, but I only have it because I'm growing it in big pots on my deck. And I am not sending this out to my parents' house because they have herds of deer in their yard. I am going to hopefully grow some of these plants and send them down to West Point, Virginia to my friend's house. I am hoping, well, they have deer pressure, even though they're down there by the river. They have deer pressure, but I don't think that the deer go down by their dock and down there by the shores. So I'm gonna see if maybe we can keep the deer off of it and put it right there, maybe where the dock meets the landscaping, and just have a really nice patches of New Jersey tea. Anyway, we'll see if they like it or if they even want it, but yeah, that is New Jersey tea. I really hope you have enjoyed this native plant seed haul. I hope you have found some new native plants to try in your garden and your landscape. But just remember, always look up the growing requirements of the plants. Don't take my word for it, because you really want to do right plant, right place if you want your plants to thrive. And I want your native plants to thrive for you, because I want you to plant more and more native plants in your yard. The other thing, I want you to make sure that you go onto BONAP. I'll put a link below. I mentioned this in my last video and in many other videos, but this is crucial to this is a crucial tool in my native plant toolbox. It's where I go. I just basically Google BONAP and then I put in the Latin name. It pulls up a web page, and it's going to show you maps for the entire family of the plant, and you go down and you find the species, and then you'll see on the map if it is native to your area or not. Now, if it's not native to your area, that's your choice to grow it, obviously, but make sure that it is not invasive to your area. You never ever want to plant invasive plants, or because they can escape your garden and then they end up in the woodlands, and that's not what we want. Okay guys, in case you missed it, I am going to put a link to the Easy Native Starter Plants, if you will. I'll put a link to that video in here. I will also put a link to my video that I did that's all about what native plants are and why they are important, and I would love it if you would give that a watch. So if you've made it this far with me, I would love it if you could like this video, and happy gardening. I will catch you again next time. And another thing to mention, these plants are just for those two projects. I'm going to be growing a lot more natives this winter, and I am super behind. I really prefer to get all my seeds into the flats and put outside sometime in November. So here we're like in the first few days of January. I really would encourage you to try some native grasses or sedges. They're really vital parts of the ecosystem, and once you start messing around with them and playing with them, you see how much movement and texture and all that good stuff that those plants will provide in your garden beds. I think using grasses and sedges is typically something people don't do until a lot later or later in their gardening journey. So if you happen to be a new native plant gardener, go and pick a native grass and go pick a native grass for sun and a native sedge for your shade garden and start experimenting.